You are tuning in to the Pop Culture Retrospective Podcast.
This show is dedicated to the memory of my big sister Rebecca, a fan of all things pop culture, particularly of the people, places, and things that defined the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Welcome aboard this pop culture time machine. I'm Amy Lewis. This is episode number 103, a conversation about trash pop culture in the year 1999 with author and journalist Ross Benesch. Join us as we chat all things 1999, including Limp Bizkit, talk shows, ICP, aka Insane Clown Posse, the dark side of the Beanie Babies, and so much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this trip back to 1999. Welcome back to the Pop Culture Retrospective Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. This afternoon, I am very grateful to be joined by the one and only Ross Benesch. Did pronounce that correctly? Ross is a journalist, market research analyst, and author. His writing has appeared in Mental Floss. Love that website. I've used that many times for the podcast. Esquire, The Wall Street Journal, Smithsonian Magazine, and Entertainment Weekly. And as an entertainment industry analyst, he's regularly cited as an expert source by the Los Angeles Times, NPR, and Bloomberg. That's fantastic. His previous books include Rural Rebellion, How Nebraska Became a Republican Stronghold, and Turned On, a mind-blowing investigation into how sex has shaped our world. And today we're going to be talking about his latest book, which is 1999, The Year Low Culture Conquered America and Kickstarted Our Bizarre Times, which will be released in April. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And it's a really fascinating look at 1999 and how it shaped trash culture during that period of time and kind of moving forward even to present day. And certainly for myself, I remember 1999 very distinctly. So this was like perfect because I was in high school and just aware of everything that was going on at that time. And he's also a frequent guest on podcasts. He was recently on the 80s and 90s Uncensored podcast, which I've mentioned many times on the show. It's a wonderful podcast. If you like this show, you'll definitely love that podcast as well. Great guys, Milo and Jamie. They are fantastic. So Ross, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, well, this is very, very exciting because this is like right up everybody's alley who listens to the show and me too. So before we kind of get into your book and 1999, the infamous year, can you tell us a little bit about kind of your growing up and, your experience during the 1990s and what you kind of remember just sort of in general?
So I grew up in a town of 300 people in Nebraska. I was 10 years old in 1999. So I basically was born right before the 90s began. And all the stuff that I talk about in my book, I was a fan of. So I listened to the Insane Clown Posse, Amazing Jekyll Brothers album with my friends. I'd watch Jerry Springer with my parents. I really loved pro wrestling. At the time, it was the Monday Night Wars. So WCW and WWF both had really highly rated cable programs. I mean, gosh, it was just so popular at that time. Played a ton of video games. I had a PlayStation 1, so that was my primary system. And
nice.
I spent a lot of time, whether it was reading or playing games or watching something that engaging in pop culture. So all that 90s stuff was totally my jam. I liked even the teen stuff, and I know people like to be harsh on them, but like the Backstreet Boys Millennium album was fantastic.
Yes, it was. And I am team NSYNC, but I will gladly support your Backstreet Boys enjoyment. They're still around and performing, which is amazing. And I may or may not have seen NSYNC in concert 3 times. But anyways, nice. So it sounds like you kind of have this nostalgic connection with the 90s for a multitude of reasons. So it certainly makes sense that you wanted to put together a little book about 1999. So I thought maybe it would be kind of interesting before we kind of dive into your book to just sort of set the scene of 1999. So in case people may or may have forgotten, Bill Clinton was president in 1999. The Matrix was released. SpongeBob SquarePants debuted on Nickelodeon. Brandy Chastain scored the winning goal of the FIFA Women's World Cup, which I pretty much sobbed when that happened because I was a soccer player and it was a pretty big moment. Gasoline
Great celebration on that
yes,
on that goal.
That was amazing. Absolutely incredible. Gas cost $1.26 a gallon. Milk was $2.96 a gallon. And the top-selling vehicle in the U.S. was the Toyota Camry, followed by the Honda Accord and the Ford Taurus, all fantastic sedan vehicles, which is not what people drive anymore. So, yeah. So in your new book, it's sort of, I really appreciate it. Kind of opens with a discussion around Limp Bizkit's cover, which I cannot believe that who approved that, which I think was really interesting because I was a frequent watcher of MTV, but I don't remember this performance. And I was a Limp Bizkit fan back in high school and middle school and stuff like that. And certainly I was raised on Prince, but it feels like this bizarre performance sort of set the tone for 1999. So why did you choose to kind of start the book with that?
Well, part of it was chronological. So the New Year's Eve is happening and it's midnight, and all of a sudden it is 1999. It's actually the year 1999. And if you're a young person, then there's a good chance you're watching MTV. So, Limp Bizkit is basically ushering in the new era, showing you how the world's going to be. And I thought they were a pretty good representation of the trashiness that I was going to dive into in the book. And I also like Limp Bizkit. I can recall the Nookie music video very well.
Mm-hmm.
Chocolate Starfish was an album I spent a lot of time listening to as a young person. So I'm not a hater, but I also recognize that they are not the Beatles or Prince. They're not one of these acclaimed artists that dozens of documentaries are going to be made about 50 years after they have passed. So. Sure. Limp Bizkit was like kind of they were on the fad of the time, like the new metal, angry dude kind of rapping, kind of rocking. They perfected that very well, and it was just kind of interesting that that's what MTV was pushing at the time. Limp Bizkit was in heavy rotation on TRL at that moment.
Yes, I definitely remember that. And I think that the extended title of the Chocolate Starfish album always sort of made me feel a little bit queasy because I have this weird sensory thing where I cannot stand the smell of hot dogs, and I have two little
Oh
boys.
yeah.
Of course, they want hot dogs all the time. So it's chocolate starfish and the hot dog flavored water, which I would love to know how in God's name they came up with that title for the album. I'm sure there's got to be some story behind that, but I feel like that is the most bizarre and nausea-inducing title of an album that I can remember from my adolescence. So,
Limp Bizkit, they played on top of the World Trade Center right before 9/11, and they got like a commemorative like thank you, because the music video for I think it's Rollin'.
yes, you're right. Yes.
Is it filmed on that's like one of the last things filmed in the World Trade Center was Limp Bizkit. They were close to becoming national martyrs.
Yeah. I guess I didn't realize that that was filmed up there, but now that you say that, that makes sense. My goodness, how crazy is that? That's so locked into time, just envisioning that in my mind. And Rolling is one of those songs that has, I think, kind of the classic Limp Bizkit lyrics where it just
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
is
I love
um,
Rollin'. So
yeah.
I gotta say, if we're talking about growing up in Nebraska. So this would have been the year. I think this would have been 2000 at this point, or 2001. So a little bit after 1999. My brother was a point guard on our high school basketball team, and they were like, they kind of viewed themselves as like badasses, even though like, they're just kind of knucklehead kids. Like they
Yeah.
get all these technical fouls, they get in fights, they talk back to the ref.
Oh jeez.
Their coach had no control over them. So instead of the pep band playing the song when they would come into the gym, they played the uncensored version of Limp Bizkit's Rolling, the Urban Assault remix.
Oh
The one that
wow.
starts with play that fucking track.
Yes. Now I know y'all be loving this shit right here. LIMP.
Yeah.
Biscuit is right here. I don't know. See why? Again, I always make this joke on my podcast. Is like, do I remember all of the information in the Constitution? No. Do I know who was the president of the United States, the 20th president of the United States? No. But do I know the opening lyrics to a Limp Bizkit song? Yes. And I haven't listened to that song in 20 years. So
Just imprinted on you because it was, you probably heard it so many times on MTV and on the radio. And you once you learn it, it's very simple.
Yeah.
You can't unlearn it. So
yeah.
that song, really, you see the adults in the audience just being disgusted if their high
Yeah.
school kids are entering the gym to that. So that's what I think of with Limp Bizkit. It's a very fond memory.
Yes. Well, nothing gets you fired up for a basketball game more so than Rollin' by Limp Bizkit. And I know I definitely had many an evening of dancing to that song in my living room and thinking I was pretty awesome. So it's definitely ingrained in my brain. So I'm glad to hear that your brother is also on team Limp Bizkit. And I
Bizkit for sure.
Yes, and I will make sure to put the clip that I actually found, like a sort of updated version of that. Somebody went in and kind of enhanced it a little bit. A video of that performance, 1999, which their take on that song was not what I was expecting at all, even from Limp Bizkit. And I think I just sort of stared at it blankly because I could not believe what I was seeing. And Fred Durst had a NSYNC shirt on. It was a whole thing. It was a whole vibe. So
yeah, it makes their cover of Faith seem pretty great by comparison.
Yeah. God, I forgot about that too. Maybe I think I've repressed that cover. So that's why maybe I can't remember it. So
that was like their first hit, $3 Bill.
Yeah.
Was the album. That was before Nookie.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna have to look that up now. So yes, what a great way to set the tone. So your book dives into 1999, and why do you think that was the era that you wanted to focus on? Why that year specifically, do you think?
Well, I originally started writing this book on like trashy stuff that's influencing our society in underappreciated ways. That was kind of my premise. And I mapped out a few chapters and I realized most of them have the same theme of being peaked in the late 90s.
Yeah.
Like very few of the things I was looking at came from a different era. And probably that's due to my personal bias. Like I'm most familiar with 90s pop culture because that's when I was a kid. But I just decided to organize it so it would be a little easier to digest around the late 90s. And I picked 99 over the other years, because obviously all this stuff that's happening in 99 is also happening in 97 and in 2001. It's not like it just only happens that year, but it seems the nuttiest in 99.
Yeah. Well, and I think you did a great job with it, because I was thinking about it the other day, and it kind of almost feels like you sort of pulled like a Cobra Kai on 1999 in a way, and sort of like kind of turning it and looking at it from a different perspective, instead of like it was, everything was perfect. It was so much simpler back then. But all this, crazy stuff happened, but you were able to sort of find the positives and sort of this bizarre TV shows, bizarre movies, bizarre people, bizarre politicians, kind of, framing it as, yeah, people watched Jerry Springer and that was, pretty horrible, the stuff that they would have on TV. But for you, it sounded like it really connected you with other kids in your neighborhood, and your parents watched it with you. It was like a collective experience. Like, maybe the next day was sort of that pencil sharpener, or they say, or water cooler talk about like, hey, did you see that crazy person on Jerry Springer? So would you agree with that and take?
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Springer 2 Out for TV, the VHS of the outtakes that you could order with a credit card.
From feuding families to forbidden fantasies. You may think Jerry's wild. You may think Jerry's outrageous. But you ain't seen nothing yet. Jerry Springer, Too Hot for TV. It's the explosive video with the most shocking footage the censors won't let you see. And you can't find it in any store. It's racy. It's raucous. It's remarkable. It's way too hot to show you here. But order now and you'll see it all. Warning, this video contains nudity and adult language. You must be 18 years or older to buy. To order, call 1-800-862-9889. That's 1-800-862-9889. Or send $19.95 plus $4.95 shipping and handling to Too Hot Video 10110.
That was something like people in my hometown would watch together. Like you knew the person who had the tape, and you would borrow it from them, and then you'd have like 10 teens come to your house, and the living room's packed, and you're watching this thing, because no one wants to go and buy it themselves. You're doing it to save money, but it's almost like a Super Bowl watch party. For Jerry Springer 2 Out for TV. So, we definitely connected over those things. And I think because it was so outrageous and scandalous, as a viewer, like, we had more fun with that than if we like all got together and watched NYPD Blue or Friends or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. No, I love that. I really love that take on it, because for me, I think when I think of Jerry Springer, I think of being homesick from school, because I was, I'm a couple of years older than you. And so I remember being kind of homesick from school. I'm like, oh, man, there's like nothing to watch. It's like, oh, Jerry Springer and Jenny Jones. Oh, this is, not much to watch, but I'm glad that it was like a fun experience for you and connected you with friends and stuff. That's actually pretty awesome.
Well, we watched most of it at nighttime, because even though it's daytime television, if an affiliate would choose to air a talk show like that, a syndicated talk show, they could really put it on whenever they want. Yeah. And Jerry Springer was so popular, they would air it, like, let's say they air it at noon. They would also air it at 9 p.m. Before the nightly news. So it would get like prime time programming. So a lot of that viewing is like, we're choosing it not just because there's nothing else on. We're saying this is better than Monday Night Football. Like, it was Jerry Springer. Yeah.
And did you all do the kind of Jerry fist pump thing? Which I completely forgot about until this very second.
That was my parents. If there was like if there's friends over and there's something happening, we might yell it after a big moment, like a good fight.
Yeah,
a good fight happens and you're laughing, you might yell Jerry with the tape. But if it's just me and my mom and dad, it was more just like laughing and being like, where do they find these people? This is just absolutely ridiculous. Like, adult man wants to pretend he's a baby and wear diapers. What is this?
Yeah. Yes, I know. It's either that, or then I always remember Maury Povich going into every episode, eventually evolved into like, who's the father, who's not the father. All these. This is just like, it stirred up so many memories, because I kind of have a photographic memory that periodically works. And so that kind of class of TV shows was huge during that time. And I think you did a great job describing it and kind of making it sort of like a sentimental thing, which is, not how a lot of people remember it. So I think that was pretty awesome.
They're influential too. They're not just popular then, but like all the stuff with reality TV now is very much taken from Jerry Springer and Ricky Lake. When you watch the Real Housewives of whatever city you're into for that franchise, those fights are like a Springer fight. I don't think you get like Vanderpump Rules without the talk shows of the 90s.
Yeah, that is such a great observation, and I think you are exactly right. Is people, I think, want that formula again, is when they had back when we had millions and millions of viewers watching something, which is much different now with so many options. I think people are maybe trying to recreate some of that and get viewership and create more chaos. And I think you even referenced the Real World in your book as well, which kind of took a turn for the worst. I personally feel when it started to become a little bit less authentic, which I know a lot of it's canned and dramatized and stuff, but I feel like the first few seasons of that show are really the only ones that are worth watching. But that's just my opinion. So I was curious about how you conducted your research for your book, because I feel like I have a pretty, I host this podcast. I'm very passionate about pop culture. I lived through all of this stuff, and I've done shows kind of covering some of these topics a little bit informally, but I feel like you really found some fascinating information that I was not aware of. So how did you go about finding all this information?
Well, I appreciate that. With this topic, I had pretty strong familiarity with all the subjects coming in, which isn't the case always. My previous books are on sex research and on Nebraska politics.
Yeah.
So those a little bit more learning on the fly. But this, I'm gonna have a chapter about Insane Clown Posse. Well, like I had 3 of their albums growing up, and my friends had, the other albums. Like, it's not like it's my first time listening to the Insane Clown Posse or reading articles about them. So I come in with a pretty strong base knowledge. But the way I make it research deep is I constantly am taking and organizing notes. So for the last few years, I've spent most of my free time when I'm able to reading about something 90s related. So, every chapter I'm reading various books related to that topic. Like there are, books on talk shows and books on video games and so on. Yeah. And I take very detailed notes of every book I read. Like I write out passages, I write out my thoughts on them. But then also every time I read articles, so academic articles, old news articles, new news articles, whatever something happens, I always take cutting sections and pasting them into a big Google Doc that just keeps getting bigger, and then I organize it. Yeah. So my sources are always there and the information's there. And then when I come time to edit a chapter, I'll say, okay, these are these 30 pages in this document here are the interesting things I've learned about talk shows and reality TV since I've last touched this chapter. Let's see where these things fit. So just to give you an example, in the book, in the Jerry Springer chapter, it's mentioned that Jerry Springer was the first show recorded on TiVo. That's not something that's in books about Jerry Springer, because a lot of those books were written before TiVo came out. That was something I read in a retrospective about TiVo, and I read that retrospective because I cover streaming advertising for my day job. So if there's things in there about TiVo and the history of TV, those are in newsletters I read. Yeah. And I was like, so I'm just like, that's an interesting fact that I cut it out. And then I just look for a spot that it may fit. So I'm not gonna rewrite the chapter to get that nugget in there. Yeah. But now that I have that little factoid, when the opportunity presents itself in the flow of the chapter, I will drop those in there. And I have probably 100 of those for every chapter, where it's just weird little surprising fact I found by reading stuff, and that's I'm gonna drop it in there, so you're just constantly learning new stuff. And I cut a lot of them because some of them just become so ancillary, they're just not related at all to the subject at hand. But we're talking about Limp Bizkit. Like they came out. I didn't realize they came out to the Ozfest set like in 13-foot tall toilets. Like they came out in these giant toilets emerging because they're like playing on the fact that people say they're shit.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, okay, well, I got to fit that in whenever I'm talking about Limp Bizkit. So I did that for every topic, and my hope is like, well, people will find enough of this interesting and they'll learn. It'll make it like more fun, like a mental floss article as you're reading this, long narrative passage.
Yeah. I feel like that would be a really great motivational poster, actually, is like a picture of Limp Bizkit coming out of the toilets. And you can say, like, whenever you feel like you're a piece of crap, just remember that Limp Bizkit were greenlit to come out of humongous 13-foot toilets. So don't feel that, don't be that down on yourself, because at least.
And they did that while they had like the #1 album in America. Or, they were on top of the world while they're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's amazing how that really, music videos and sort of that exposure really led to crazy album sales, which now that's, again, just so different. Like people are not racing to watch some concert or MTV Spring Break or, anything like that. So I'm sure that is kind of ridiculous as that sounds. I bet that was very effective for reaching the audience, and like, who doesn't want to buy the album of the dudes that came out of the toilet? I mean, I know I do.
So they embrace the trash. That's another reason why I started the book with Limp Bizkit, because I'm embracing the trashiness.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously they didn't care. They weren't offended if someone knocked them down.
Sure. Yeah. Yes. Definitely. Yeah. Well, and so the Limp Bizkit information. That was really fascinating. And one other, several, but first of kind of your topics that I found really interesting and just learned more than I was aware of was Beanie Babies, which we all know that was the craze and kind of crashed and burned and stuff like that. And I think a lot of the focus around who were huge fans of Beanie Babies were maybe kids or these sort of obligatory suburban housewives. But you took a deeper dive and shared that there was some violence surrounding Beanie Babies. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I don't want to spoil the whole book, but I really loved the detail.
Well, because they were so momentarily valuable, like people were selling ones that were perceived to be rare for thousands of dollars, there was quite a bit of crime that happened around Beanie Babies. So there were robberies, stores having their windows smashed, and like the robbers would take Beanie Babies. They wouldn't even take the cash register. They're just taking bags of Beanie Babies out of these pharmacies. There was a guy who was shot and killed in a dispute about Beanie Babies. There was there was a couple where the guy lit his house on fire accidentally because they were torching the Beanie Babies collection. He was like, they were getting back at their soon to be ex-partner, and the bonfire of Beanie Babies got caught. Like I don't know if the wind moved it or what, but suddenly the roof is on fire because they started all these damn Beanie Babies, and now they're in the Iowa Supreme Court arguing why their insurer should cover the fire damage started by their Beanie Baby house fire. There was the craziest one is just in Las Vegas, there was a couple that was divorcing and they couldn't decide who would take the Beanie Babies because you're dividing your assets 50-50, and they think their Beanie Babies are worth like $15,000, and they're saying, well, I bought those. No, this one came from you. So the judge just made them take turns picking them one by one in the courtroom in front of everyone.
Unbelievable. And I wonder what, and I wonder what, if they maybe had a family member or like a close friend in attendance as sort of like, security blanket or something. If after witnessing that, they're like, my God, Susie I had to watch for 3 hours while her and Bob divvied up their stupid Beanie Babies. I think this is a friendship that needs to end because their priorities are ridiculous.
Could be, or maybe their friends were mad that they picked the wrong ones and they're into the craze too.
That's true. You let the Princess Diana one go.
Yeah, how'd you let Princess Diana go and you chose dog Bones the dog? Like, he's not wearing anything.
Right. I thought I knew you. It turns out you're a moron. Yes, I think Beanie Babies, much like Monopoly, I feel like really, could brings out the worst in people sometimes. But that was really interesting because I'd never heard any of that, and it kind of aligns with what I learned about the founder of Beanie Babies, and he sort of had a bit of a short temper, and I believe he threw a Beanie Baby at a employee at one point, I want to say. And I kind of joked that I'm sure that tag did not feel good when it hit somebody in the eye. So it kind of all aligns. And to go back to Jerry Springer for a second, do you think that there's sort of like a long-lasting impact from, well, Jerry Springer, but the other shows like Jenny Jones and Ricky Lake and Sally Jesse Raphael? Do you think that there's some lasting effects of those shows on society today?
Well, yeah, we're living in the Jerry Springer administration right now, and Jerry Springer has basically said that himself before he died.
Yeah.
Trump took his show to the White House. The style of talk show that he ran, where it's arguing over debate, it's just shock and scandal over substance.
Sure.
Americans like that a lot.
Yeah.
So that that's led to new forms of television. Like I've mentioned before, reality TV takes a lot of its cues from the 90s talk shows. But gosh, it's not just Trump. I mean, there was a Teamsters congressional hearing about a year ago, and one of the U.S. senators was like threatening to fight the Teamsters president during this Senate confirmation. I mean, that's basically like Jerry Springer. They're like egging on each other, like they're gonna throw blows. Our style of national politics right now isn't much different from Jerry Springer. In fact, John Fetterman apologized to the Jerry Springer show because you'd say that Congress was like Jerry Springer, and he's apologized because he says that's actually that's like a disservice to the Jerry Springer show. Congress is worse, basically.
Yeah, right. Like we were on TV. Like, what's your excuse? You're supposed to be representing the people. So yeah, that's that makes sense. And one thing I meant to ask if you remember this, because I feel like I've asked a couple people and they don't remember, but on Sally Jesse Raphael, she was kind of notorious for having teenagers on. Well, all these shows were like teenagers who were doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. And one of her tactics on the show was to put young people with like a sandwich board on, and it would say something like, I do drugs and I want to go to jail, and they'd have to like walk around, and while people would like yell at them on the street as like punishment, like, what? I don't know if you remember that.
So basically they're doing like I think it's Die Hard with a Vengeance, where Bruce Willis has to like walk around Harlem with a sign, like a very offensive sign against black people. And like it's basically like he's gonna get killed because he's having to wear this crazy placard. So they're doing that. They're doing the Die Hard with a Vengeance for teenagers. Yeah.
Oh my God, that would like so not happen now. That would be canceled. I wonder how many kids, turn their lives around because of an appearance on a show or anybody who was on a talk show that made them change their ways.
I don't recall that specific angle, but I do remember on Maury where they would have like the kid who's just like some shithead kid who's like always fighting in school and talk back to the parents, and they'd be like, we're sending you to boot camp, and like the boot camp guy would come and just start yelling at him and like putting him down, and then like by the end of the episode they're like, and now this kid is obedient.
Right. Oh my God. I was going to have a child at 13, but because of that sandwich board that I had to wear in New York City and I was yelled at by strangers, I decided to change my ways. I'm
gonna have to look for that. I totally missed that one. I know Sally got into a wrestling ring one time on set. They had like a duke it out sort of situation. They have like a little faux wrestling ring set up for the guests to get into. I think they were trying to compete with Springer. I don't know how long that lasted.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that's when the sandwich board got brought to the idea table. So that makes sense. Well, maybe when you do volume 2 of your book, you can take a close look at Sally Jesse Raphael, because that was a very bizarre tactic. And the other topic that I really enjoyed learning about was Insane Clown Posse, aka ICP.
Kevin Kelly standing by with the oddities and the Insane Clown Posse. Insane Clown Posse, you make your in-ring wrestling debut tomorrow night on Raw is War. That's right! We finally get a chance to show our friends the oddities and anybody else has been watching us get beat down that we know what we're doing in the ring, combined with what they taught us in our own juggalo style of fighting. Kai and Tai, it's time to die and die.
Because I think I was probably a little bit older than when it became really popular, so I don't remember hearing a lot about them when I was like in middle school or high school. But my first experience with ICP is I used to work at a residential treatment program for homeless and adjudicated teenagers and young adults. And there were these 2 kids that were kind of like the black sheep of the program. Like they just were kind of just didn't want to like hang out with all the other residents in the program. They just kind of kept to themselves. And one of the kids had a tattoo of, is it the Juggalo or whatever that has like the little axe or something that's like running?
The Hatchet Man.
Hatchet Man. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So if you, Hatchet gear is what it's called if you like have memorabilia. The Hatchet Man is the logo of Psychopathic Records, which is their record label that they founded.
Okay. Okay. And then that sort of led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole at the time. I'm like, who the heck is this ICP? And you kind of described how you learned about them in a really interesting way in your book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So ICP, most people by now may be familiar with them, but they're high school dropout duo from Detroit who paint their faces and they rap about murder and magic, and they've had a bunch of albums, but they peaked in the 90s. And part of the reason they became nationally famous is because they were signed to a label owned by Disney and then removed from the label before their album dropped. And so it was this like, they got all this organic attention because it's like, you're getting screwed over by the, I mean, who is the man more so than Disney?
Right.
He's like, this is the largest media corporation in the world. And you have this artist and now you're just kicking them to the curb. And Disney was facing boycotts at the time because Southern Baptists were protesting Disney for being too gay friendly. And then they started picking at Disney for like all these other things that they said were obscene. And of course, one of them is the Insane Clown Posse. So it's kind of a weird fit to start with. Like they had other albums and they weren't on the Disney label, and then they got signed because they were getting bigger, a little bit bigger, but it clearly wasn't a fit. And after they got booted, they go to this legal battle with Disney, and everyone's like on the side of ICP. And now they're like kind of blowing up because they're getting more. They're a band that was selling like, you know, a few hundred albums a week in Detroit, doing small shows, and now they're like on national news over this suit with Disney. And so that's how like my friend's cousin found out about him. He was like in his late 20s, unemployed meth addict who would stay with him, and we'd watch pro wrestling and stuff like all night. And, just you know, we watch Faces of Death. We'd watch all sorts of stuff that like we shouldn't be watching. And he showed us ICP. I was like, oh, this is great. It's like, this is so silly and like, bizarre. Like I wasn't familiar with anything that was that theatrical. Like I liked rap music. I liked Eazy-E and NWA, but like this is like just like bizarre, kooky stuff. Like it's like Stephen King, you know?
Yeah, I really love how you described that individual who introduced you to the music. And again, like taking like a positive take on it, like, because, you know, certainly that's unique that this older person was, you know, telling kids about ICP. And
I was like 10.
Yeah. And to 10-year-olds. Yeah. And I'm sure you were like, oh my God, this guy is like the coolest, you know, the coolest guy ever. And then as an adult, like, wait a minute, I was hanging out with you. But hey, he introduced you to ICP. So, I mean, that's
the good outweighed the bad, you know. And he did later go to jail for trying to run over someone with his car, but that was after he introduced me to ICP. So
Oh,
Hope he's doing well.
yeah. Here's hoping. But yeah, that's so funny that the Disney connection too, because again, just the level of depth that you've taken, like can't see it, but behind me, I have a whole bookshelf of Disney books. I was like a cast member. I'm like a big Disney history nut. I had no idea that there was a connection between ICP and Disney. So that was really fascinating. And then it made me picture in my head one thing that Disney did a lot in the late 90s and early 2000s was put concerts on at Walt Disney World, performed by various, musicians and artists. Like Johnny Lang, a guitarist, had a special. Britney Spears had one. NSYNC did one because the Backstreet Boys had to drop out at the last minute or something like that. So then they came in, and which actually was huge exposure for them and led to like that be exploding. So I can only imagine what would have happened if ICP performed at, the Magic Kingdom in front of, 5-year-olds and
That would
Mickey
have been
Mouse.
awesome.
Yeah. They could have decked out Mickey Mouse with like weird makeup and had him run around with a hatchet or something. I mean,
Yeah, you could be dousing all the kids with Faygo. That would have been fantastic.
mhm.
Probably wouldn't have went over too well, but I would have loved to see an ICP of that era. That was like their best albums, like Great Malenko. Yeah, follow up Britney Spears with some Halls of Illusion and showing people going through a psychological carnival of torture. That would have been just exquisite.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they could have really thrown that into their whole Halloween celebration. I think they have missed that ship has sailed, and they should have consulted with us before they dropped them from the label. Well, before we kind of wrap up, and we'll do some nostalgia questions here in a moment, but you've clearly done a ton of fascinating research, and you're a very talented writer, and your stuff has appeared everywhere. What do you hope that readers take away from your book?
That the lowest common denominator in our pop culture can still teach you a lot about the society around you. So all this stuff, ICP, Jerry Springer, pro wrestling, violent video games, even Beanie Babies,
Yeah,
was routinely mocked and looked down upon, and described as throwaway entertainment. It's just stuff that you consume and forget about. But I would say that the pop culture that is the most mocked or is considered the trashiest, it still matters to the people who are consuming it, and it could still affect the world just as much or more so than anything that's super acclaimed.
Oh, well said. Yeah, and I think, like I said, your take is so unique, and that's not something that, as somebody who's a pretty avid reader of pop culture articles and books and stuff, your unique take on it, I think, is a really great reason for people to read it, because they're going to learn something that's not really discussed in other books, and you're hitting on topics that a lot of people are not hitting on, because everything's very much like, it was great, this was cheesy, it was, but there was a lot more to it than.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I was on another show a few weeks ago, and they made some comment about the 90s are so great and peaceful, and everyone got along, that'd be such a more fun time to research than today, where everything just sucks. And I was like, well, if you read the news articles that were published in the 90s about these topics, they didn't think it was so great.
Right.
Any of the debates around regulating the internet and protecting speech online, they were as contentious then as they are now. So there was a lot of anxiety behind all this stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It just was not as readily available as it is now. So I think that's the difference, is crap happens in every decade, but the ability to access and be aware of said information just becomes easier and easier. And then I think then becomes more and more overwhelming. So yeah, that's a really
well, I know when you think back about the 90s, you're thinking about of a time when you're younger, and you think of the pop culture you consumed. It's easy to forget, after Columbine, books and movies and everything got censored because of it. We just think, 1999, yeah, I love The Matrix and The Sixth Sense, and
Yeah.
Backstreet Boys. Yeah, that time was great. Like you don't think about like some of the worser aspects when you recall the pop culture that makes you happy as a kid.
Right. Yeah. Well, that line, that reminds me of a really great, I guess it's a documentary. It's by Roger Moore's Bowling for Columbine.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating look at all of that. So if you're interested in learning more about that unfortunate event in American history, certainly a very interesting and fascinating documentary to check out. But the other question I had about your book was, what surprised you the most as you were doing your research?
Just how big Beanie Babies really were. I knew there was a fad, and we all kind of collected them, or at least were aware of someone who had collected them.
Yeah.
But they accounted for more than 10% of eBay's revenue at the time. And like when eBay became a public company, they cite in their financial documents that the volatility of the Beanie Baby resale market is a potential risk to their business for investors. So it's just crazy to think the impact they had on e-commerce at the time.
Yeah. Because I think weren't they one of the first companies that sold products online or something like that? Or
yeah, they were very innovative with online marketing. That's how they drove a lot of the community around collecting, and that's a lot of the price guide information came from online, and they had more info about they have like the little poem and the name with each stuffed animal, but they'd have more info about your favorite beanies online. So they were probably a decade ahead of most toy companies in terms of using the internet to market their products. Super innovative.
Yeah, and they were very much, I don't know what their policy is now, but I know in the beginning they would not sell their products in chain stores, so there was no Beanie Babies to be found at Walmart or your local grocery store. They really wanted to make it seem like a special item. So I think you're absolutely right that they were ahead of their time, big time, despite all the crazy behind the scenes stuff. Yeah.
Now they're in chains, but they're a shadow of what they used to be. Like you said, they used to be in independent toy stores or independent pharmacies.
Yeah.
Now they have like revenue that's 5% of what it used to be, and they do a lot of licensed stuff. Like you'll see like a new I'm trying to think of an example here, but like it'll be Beanie Babies but designed like a new Disney movie or like a new DreamWorks movie. And you can find them at Walgreens and CVS now. That's probably the two most common places they're sold.
Yeah. So bizarre. So bizarre. Beanie Babies leaving a legacy, one bean at a time. All right. So thankfully we've got a few more minutes here. And one thing I always like to do just to help the audience and myself kind of get to know the people that are on the show is to kind of ask them some nostalgia rapid fire questions. And I sort of intentionally wrote down some questions that are kind of connected with what you've written about. So hopefully you'll enjoy and have some interesting answers for these questions. So my first one is, if you could climb into a time machine and travel back to 1999 with unlimited amounts of money, transportation, no barriers, what do you think you would want to do?
Oh man, that's a great question. Well, part of me would like to see Woodstock 99 for like 12 hours. And, if I had the unlimited money, I could actually drink water there and eat and pay for the ticket and then not feel guilty when I leave. Because I'm not staying for the 3 days. I'm not, I'm not going to witness, I'm not going to be there when everything gets burnt to the ground.
Yeah.
But I would like to just see like what it was actually like, if it was as terrible as people said. Would there be any moment of actual joy, or would I just be sweating to death on a military base in upstate New York in the middle of summer?
Right.
So that would be one thing I would have definitely done. Let me think here. Another thing I would have done in 99. Well, Nebraska football was really good back then. So I would have loved to travel around and see them play. In 99, we we ended up finished second or third in the AP poll. And we beat Texas in the Big 12 championship. So I would have went to the Big 12 championship and watched Nebraska beat Texas, and then I would have went to the bowl game, even though that would have been in the year 2000, and watched them beat Tennessee a month later. So definitely would have done that. I would have loved to have been front row at one of those Backstreet Boys concerts and just like felt how overwhelming, or NSYNC.
Yeah.
I was more of a Backstreet Boys fan, but NSYNC's got some tunes that I like.
Yeah.
And just like feel how intense the young girl fandom was for those guys. Like,
yeah.
That's the closest you would get to Beatlemania for my generation, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. It was certainly intense, and I think the big difference at that point too was just the being present and being aware and not being distracted, I think was huge. There's no weird, maybe somewhere somebody's got some bad cell phone, really, really, really bad cell phone footage, maybe, of a concert, maybe. But I think, part of that mania was just because you were 100% focused on the five guys that were, performing. And it was like when I went to one of the NSYNC concerts I went to was at Soldier Field, I think, in Chicago. I'm from Illinois. And the whole stadium was full. Just unbelievable. And Taylor Swift, I think does that kind of now, but most performers are not, playing these huge, unbelievable, huge crowds. So definitely an interesting thing to be part of.
Last thing I would have done is I would have loved to have been in the business of buying domain names just to be able to sell them for an obscene profit, even when they're absolutely worthless, because that was super common then. You're like on the precipice of the .com. So just be involved in the nuttiness of the .com bubble. And then if on New Year's Eve, I would have liked to have been in the We Live in Public stunt that, what was that guy's name? Josh Harris.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, he made all this money in the .com bubble, and he had all these artists and performers live in this underground terrarium in New York City on New Year's Eve. And they filmed a documentary called We Live in Public. And it's a little culty, but it would have been interesting to be in there for like a day.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a crazy section of the book on that. That is for sure. Let's see. Next one is several notable albums were released in 1999. Out of this list, which album would you want to listen to on repeat? We're going to say on a CD. And which album would you want to use as a frisbee? Because you can't stand it. So some of those albums that were released. So picking one that you'd want to listen to on repeat, one that you'd want to toss into the ocean. Slim Shady, Californication, 2001, Fan Mail, Significant Other, Limp Bizkit, Astro Lounge by Smash Mouth, The Real World by Missy Misdemeanor Elliott, On the Six by J-Lo, and The Battle of Los Angeles, Rage Against the Machine. So hopefully I didn't ramble those too quickly and you know who.
Honestly, I like... So the only one I'm not familiar with is Fan Mail.
Okay.
So and who's the artist in Fan Mail?
TLC.
Oh, TLC. Gosh, because I was gonna say I'd use Fan Mail as a frisbee just because I'm not familiar with it, but I actually like TLC. Well, so listen over and over again. 2001 is at the Dr. Dre.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. I would pick 2001 as the album I'd want to listen to over and over.
Yeah.
As a frisbee, maybe the J-Lo album, but I should like some J-Lo songs.
Mm-hmm.
It was just probably my least favorite of what was mentioned, but it's tough though because with pop music in '99, there's not a lot of it that I didn't like.
Right. Yeah.
I'd listen to Mambo Number 5 if that was on there too.
Yes. Oh, geez. Yeah, that came on the other day on our Echo Dot or whatever. I was like, oh dear, I can't. I gotta skip this one.
It's like Astro Lounge is probably the one that like people would make fun of, but the Smash Mouth, that's the one that's got All Star on it, right?
It's a good question. I am very much I can't handle Smash Mouth music person, so I'm not a great resource for their music, but probably I'm guessing if that was like a top selling album,
Yeah, because
probably.
like All Star was a huge hit in
Yes.
the end of the '90s.
Yeah.
So I got to think Astro Lounge is the one with All Star. So like, I
Yeah.
like that song.
Okay.
I should have had something more prepared to throw as a frisbee because like I you just list a bunch of albums that I'm like those are great.
Well, no, that's I think that's a nice thing because I feel like I'm, I feel like I have a lot of like strong feelings about like alternative music that just drives me nuts, and I need to like just simmer it down a little bit. So that's good that you're receptive to all those different musicians and stuff. I think that's a good thing. Okay, and then just a few just sort of general like 90s questions. What is your favorite movie from the 1990s? Or I know sometimes that's hard for people to say one, but if you have like, one, two.
Oh yeah, I mean I'll even go with '99. I love The Matrix.
Yep.
Very
That was
innovative
huge.
and like
Yeah.
just such a deep, like mind-bending film. I like it to this day, and I really loved it back then.
Yeah. Have you watched it recently? I haven't, and I feel like I should. I wonder how
I
it
watched
holds up.
it, yeah, like 2.5 years ago. I rewatched the trilogy, and yeah, the first one's still by far the best. The others are still very kind of all over the place and confusing.
Yeah. I think I've only seen the first one, but maybe I should rewatch that too. All right, we'll do two more questions here. Let's see. Who was your favorite wrestler in the 1990s? You talked a lot about that, and you're a big fan.
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Hmm.
And that's the bottom line.
Yeah. Yep. I was more of like, I think the only time I really watched wrestling was in the 80s, but I definitely remember, he was like plastered all over everything in t-shirts and merch.
So big.
Yeah.
Austin 316 was.
Oh, God, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see a lot of young guys wearing those shirts back then. That was everywhere. Austin 316 in that really basic font, like black shirt with white font.
Right. Oh man. Yes, I definitely remember that. All right. So let's see. Last question is, how would you describe the trash culture of 1999 to someone who is maybe a young adult, like a college student age or something? How would you describe that to a young adult who didn't experience it?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of it is aimed at young guys, and it's a little aggressive, but it's just so over the top and zany that even when you're a fan of it, it's something to not take too seriously. Yeah.
That's a very good point. Yes, just it's entertainment, and yeah. That's always think about that. The quote is "Don't take life too seriously. Nobody gets out alive," which is such a cliche, but in many ways, it's very true. So before we officially wrap up here, can you tell people a little bit more about how they can find you? When's your book coming out? Where can they get that? All that good stuff.
So you can find me on my website, rawspanish.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter a little bit. And the book is available anywhere that books are sold. If you go to the University Press of Kansas website and you use the code 241999, 241999, you will get 30% off and free shipping. So that would give you a better deal than if you get it off Amazon. But if you don't want to use them, Bookshop is always good too.
Okay. Well, wow, that's really good to know. So I will make sure that all that information is in the show notes and links to everything. So Ross, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be on the show. I really appreciate it, and working around my really bizarre schedule. Kids are cute and everything, but God,
I understand. I'm
needy.
It's going to be really tough here soon for me.
Yeah. It's a crazy ride, but wouldn't have it any other way. So thank you so much for being on, and you're welcome back to the show anytime.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Amy.
I hope you enjoyed this look back at the year 1999 with author and journalist Ross Benesch. One thing I really appreciated about Ross was his sincere love of the 1990s and what he experienced as a child and adolescent. Clearly, we both have a lot of stories to tell about how pop culture impacted us in one way or another. And those of us who make up the millennial/zennial/Gen Xers who are passionate about the pop culture of our generation are really all cut from the same cloth, and I think Ross is really no exception. I will make sure to post some links in the show notes so you can find Ross, his latest book, and also the discount code that he mentioned on the show. I hope you will join me for my next episode where we will discuss yet another fascinating facet of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s in memory of my sister. Until then, be kind, be safe, and hold on to your memories.
Thank you for tuning into my mama's podcast and the memories of Auntie Rebecca.